Thank you for clapping in advance. I'm Tucson Ray. I came over here this morning to share this with you because William asked me if I would share some of my experience with prisoners. First of all, let me say that I want to share some of my story. It's important that I do that. I do that every chance I get because it's terribly critical for me to remember how bad it was. And I must also remember how good it is now and what made the difference. Because if I forget any one of those three things, I might be right out there again. And I don't want to do that. A little bit about my story. It started out very early in life. From my earliest recollections, I was fascinated with nudity. Certainly from age 4 on. That's about as far back as I can remember anything. And then in puberty I discovered masturbation and fantasy and just went wild. I thought when I was old enough maybe I should get married because maybe that would solve my problems. And of course many of you know about that. But of course it didn't. I was married for 15 years, had 7 children, and I decided I had the wrong wife. If I had the right wife, I'd be okay. And so I left that wife, got a divorce, married a second wife who would really fix me. And of course, that didn't work either. And so 13 years later, and 2 more children, I decided I made the same mistake twice. If I really had the right wife, I'd be okay. And so I left my second family, married a third wife, and went further and further downhill. She finally took me to counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists of different kinds, and nothing did any good because I was in great denial and I wasn't sharing my stuff with any of those people because they couldn't understand me anyway. Finally, in desperation, after 7 years of that third marriage, she decided she couldn't live with me anymore. So I found myself alone. We had moved from Tucson over to San Diego, as a matter of fact. And I was living alone in a flophouse hotel, losing my job, just going crazy. And I cried out for help to SA. Now, I should tell you that back a few years before that, about 4 years before that, I had gone through a treatment center for alcoholism. So I knew something about the 12-step program. When I came out of that, my third wife had gotten me to go to some SA meetings over in Tucson. I did that for a couple of years, and it didn't work. And I was convinced that the program wasn't right for me. Now I understand that I wasn't right for the program. I wasn't ready. But in San Diego, in 1988, I called out for help, and SA was there. And I am very happy to say that I've been sober ever since. That's one of the miracles in my life. But it just happened overnight that I became sober. I'm simplifying, of course, because there were many trials and tribulations along the way. But that's what happened. They told me I should do 4 things. They told me I should go to meetings, get a sponsor, read the book, and work the steps. Sounded pretty simple to me. And so I decided I would do that. Actually, I had been suicidal quite a number of times between the time I was in for alcoholism treatment and 1988 when I got serious about SA. Somebody told me recently that for a hardcore addict of any kind, to consider suicide is redundant. But if I was anything, I was redundant. I kept doing the same things over and over. In San Diego, in those early days of recovery, I had a real spiritual awakening. And started attending a church there that In fact, my wife and I attend now once a month. We fly over from Tucson on Sunday morning to San Diego, and we go to church. We have lunch somewhere in San Diego. We either go to the harbor or to the beach, and then we fly back in the afternoon, late afternoon, back to Tucson. It's a very, very important church in my life because it was my real connection with my higher power. I can tell you how good it is now. What happened was that I got sober in July of '88. I lived alone over in San Diego for a year, working the steps, going to church as I indicated, working on myself very, very hard. And after a year, I went back to Tucson, moved back in with my family, my second wife and the two daughters. We weren't remarried immediately, but I maintained my sobriety, my abstinence, and I credit my wife with an awful lot of that. She understood, she supported, and we got along. And for a year, we lived that way until we got remarried. And I can tell you that some people have asked me, what do you do for a whole year when you're not having sex? I said, you talk a lot. We got to know each other. We got to know each other in ways that we never had the first time around. And finally when we got married, we at our wedding, they sang a song the second time around. And it was a lot lovelier the second time around. I had an opportunity in Tucson. When I got there, there was only one SA meeting in town, and it was a mixed meeting. It had people from SA, SAA, and SLAA all in the same meeting. And of course, if they were talking about a certain step and how to work it, I could participate in that kind of discussion. But when they started talking about sobriety, I didn't know what to do. I didn't think that could work for me. A few months later, they decided on Sunday night that they were going to split up the other meeting because some of the guys were attending both meetings, the one on Sunday night and the one that was an SA meeting, a real SA meeting. And they wanted a second real SA meeting. So they split up the one on Sunday night. So now, since that time, we've had at least 2 SA meetings every week in Tucson. For a while, we had a women's meeting, SA meeting in Tucson. For a while, we had an S-Anon meeting in Tucson. We've had a couples meeting on a monthly basis in Tucson. That's still going very well. The S-Anon has disintegrated, and the women's meeting has disintegrated, but we still have 2 men's meetings. One is actually an open meeting for women as well, but there aren't any women attending at the present time. I don't know how many of you have looked carefully, I mean really carefully, at the promises in the big book of AA. But we read those promises at every meeting in Tucson. It's important for us to hold out that strength and that hope for the future. What a lot of people don't understand when they read those promises is that they come to a certain point in the AA big book. It comes in the discussion of step 9, making amends. And it says by the time we're halfway through. And so people working step 3 say, I don't feel any promises. I don't feel any promises step 5. Well, it doesn't say that. It says by the time you're halfway through making amends. You see? And so we try to emphasize that. We've even paraphrased that, the beginning of that section in the book. Well, my recovery has gone through several phases. First, I read the steps, and then I worked the steps, and then I tried to incorporate the steps into my life, really integrate them into my life. And more recently, I've been trying to integrate my life into the steps. The steps are paramount in my life. Those are the guidelines for my life. As a result, my life has turned around 180 degrees. I'm going in the opposite direction. Almost everything in my life has changed 180 degrees. I used to live with an attitude of power, and now it's an attitude of powerlessness. I used to live a life of lust, and now I try to live a life of love. Very, very opposite. Lust is very self-centered, and love is very other-centered. My life was in a downward spiral, and now it's in an upward spiral. I've moved from materialism to spirituality. Things don't mean much to me anymore, but boy, lots of spiritual stuff does. From acquiring things to letting go. From asking God to do my will, that's how I used to pray. And now I tell myself to do God's will. And that's how I pray. From dissatisfaction to gratitude. Yeah, nothing ever pleased me before. Now I try to be thankful for everything. Some of you have heard the statement, WIFM, what's in it for me? W-I-I-F-M. WIFM? Well, WIFM for me means now, what's in it from me? What have I contributed to that thing? What part of me is in that? How much of my sweat, blood, tears? That's what I like to see today. Ever since I became sober, I've been trying to work on unconditional love. Our two daughters have both forgiven me, as well as my wife. And the older of those two is an alcoholic. She's been sober now for 3.5 years. She knew what I had been through, and she knew what she was going through as an alcoholic and a drug addict. And she asked me one day about AA, and I got her connected up with an AA meeting. Then she asked me to be her sponsor, and I said, oh, I don't think I want to do that. I don't think that would be good for you, and I don't think it would be good for me. And she said, but I want you to do it anyway. And so, reluctantly, I said, we'll try it. But at any point, if you think it's not working, or if I think it's not working, we're going to stop this thing. So it worked. She got to step 5, and I said, now, this is the step where you share your step 4. You know, you can share this with the minister. You can share this with a counselor. You can share this with a close friend. Anybody you want to share it with. And she said, Dad, I want to share it with you. Well, she had heard my whole story anyway. She knew everything there was to know about me. And I said, well, are you sure? And she said, yeah. I think you know enough about me so that I'm not going to withhold anything from you. Well, I heard some things in that fifth step that I didn't know about her. But she was open and she was honest and she did it, and it worked. So I violated a couple of rules. One is you shouldn't sponsor a woman, and 2, you shouldn't sponsor a relative. But, you know, God works in mysterious ways. And it has worked very, very well. She's got a good program of sobriety. She's in charge of her own neighborhood meeting now. Yeah, just taking on a lot of responsibility for service. Well, I mentioned unconditional love. I've been working more recently on unconditional gratitude, a concept that I think is interesting to me and a good test for me. Am I thankful for everything in my life? Everything, absolutely everything. The things that I've enjoyed and the things that I've hated. And as I look back over the past, you know, if I hadn't been an addict, I wouldn't be where I am today spiritually. Just wouldn't be. I'm convinced I would have slid through on the surface of life like an awful lot of people I know. People ask me, well, are you normal now? I don't know what normal is. I've never been normal. I wouldn't recognize it if I saw it. But I know what's good for me. Other people say, what caused you to be an addict? I don't know. I hear people talk about about heredity. You know, my folks were both alcoholics. Maybe that's it. Some people talk about environment, you know, and I said, well, yeah, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I guess that's my environment. But I don't care what caused it. Doesn't matter if it's in my genes or in my psyche or where it is. I've heard an awful lot of people trying to get sober who worry and study and struggle with what caused it, you know. And I say, I don't need to know what caused it. I just need to know I got it, and I need to know what to do about it. And if I do that, I'll be okay. I may not be normal, because I don't know what that is, but I'll be okay. So I claim spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. I'm not a saint. Still working on that. I'll be working on that and sobriety, positive sobriety, the rest of my life. I know I will. And now I want to share with you some of my experience with prisoners before my time's up. One of the first things that happened in the SA meetings in Tucson was that a young man walked in and said he was interested in SA. We listened to his story, and he said that he had been arrested. He was convicted, in fact, and was awaiting sentencing. And he wanted to come to meeting. And we all pretty much figured that he was going to try to impress the judge with what he was doing in the meantime. But we took him at his word, and he attended meetings. And his sentencing hearing kept getting postponed, and first thing you know, it was 7-8 months. And he was attending meetings on a regular basis. And of course, it's kind of contagious. You can't attend meetings for a long time and not get sincere about sharing what you're sharing. And he was working the steps, and he was making some good progress. He was sober and so on. Well, when he finally got sentenced to 12 years, I went with him to his sentencing, and I'd been his sponsor, and then he was incarcerated, and I got on his visitors list. And in Arizona, you can only be on one prisoner's visitor list at a time. You have to get off of one list to get on another list. You can only visit one prisoner at a time. And so I got on his visitors list. I saw him every month or 6 weeks, and the prison was right there in Tucson, and so it was easy enough to get there. So I did that, and eventually he got moved out of town, and another prisoner had come through our meetings, and so I got on his list and visited him, and that thing just kind of grew. You know, I didn't plan to do that. God puts things in front of me that I don't expect, and it's up to me to take advantage of those things and to do what's in front of me to do. So then that prisoner got moved out, and I kept in touch with these prisoners by writing to them, and they kept working the steps and staying sober and all that, and we kept the correspondence going. Well, then one of them met a friend in the prison, fellow prisoner, who showed some interest in the program. And he said, would it be okay if I give him your name and address so that he can write to you? So I said, well, sure. I guess it won't hurt anything, you know. Something else God put in front of me to do. So I started writing to that one and sent him literature, sent him the step guides that I wrote up myself. First one of which I wrote when I was still in San Diego. But I sent him step guides one at a time, you know, and he started working the steps and getting sober and writing back. You know, he would work the steps, write them out, send them to me. I'd critique those and send him a guide for the next step, and we go on. Well, that thing grew until I found myself sponsoring about half a dozen guys in prison. And they were having varying degrees of staying sober, like any meeting. But it was satisfying enough to me to keep me going, and I had never been much of a letter writer, but I became one. And I started sharing my experience, strength, and hope with them in the letters. and the thing just kept growing. Well, eventually I got in touch with William, and he started asking me if I would be willing to take on somebody who had contacted the SA Corrections Committee and wanted to have some information about SA. So I said, well, sure, I'll do that. So I've gotten now, I don't know how many names from William, 4 or 5 perhaps. But the one that I wanted to share with you that I think is most interesting was that this was a young man, 16 years old, in a juvenile detention program in Texas. And so I wrote to him, sent him some information, and a first step guide. And by golly, I got an answer back, you know. And I haven't gotten answers back on all these people who say they're interested because they don't follow through, just like people who go to meetings once or twice and never show up again. Well, anyway, I worked with this young man, and he got sober, has worked the steps, just gone all the way through the steps, and he had a friend at his same state school. He asked me, could he give his friend my name, and would I correspond with him? Well, I guess I would. So that has spread, and now I'm working with those 2 young men. They're both sober. They're both working steps in the same school. They have their own little meetings. They get together. They have a little more freedom to get together in a state school like that than you would in a prison. In prison, every time 2 prisoners are talking to each other, the guards suspect something's going on, and they stop it. Also, over this time period, I have tried on 3 different occasions, under 3 different wardens, with the state prison in Tucson, to start an SA meeting. I was able to get some conversation going the first time, but when it got to the warden, the answer was no. We're not going to do that. In fact, the letter that I got back almost said over my dead body. As what he said, as long as I'm warden, this will not happen at this prison. Didn't tell me why. They don't have to tell you why. Prison is a very demoralizing place. The prisoners feel it the hardest, but everybody else who's in there or tries to get in there to help anybody is demoralized as well. Not treated like people, you're treated like chattel. The rules are arbitrary and capricious, no rhyme or reason, just because that's the rule, and you're going to follow it. And you're going to follow it if you're a visitor or if you're a prisoner inmate. The second time I tried under a different warden, again it got all the way to the warden, and he said no, we're not going to do it. He wasn't quite as nasty in his letter. He just said we're not going to do it. The third time, it was the wife of one of the members of our fellowship in Tucson who knew about me from the couples meeting, and she was contacted by a chaplain out at the prison because he knew that she was working. She actually did some work that was related to people with problems. And he asked her if she knew anybody who could do something with sex addiction. So she asked me to get in touch with this chaplain, and I did. And I met with him for breakfast one day. We talked about the program. We talked about possibilities. He got to know me. He understood that I was sober for some time and all that. And I thought, wow, this is looking pretty good. Maybe I've got a personal relationship with somebody who can make a difference. Well, I sent him a lot of stuff, and my whole resume, and he wanted my professional resume as well as my sexaholic story. And so I did the whole thing for him. Then he took it to the head chaplain, and the head chaplain was impressed. Yes, this is a good thing. We ought to be doing this. And they took it to the deputy warden, and the deputy warden said, yeah, this is something we really want to try. After the first of the year, we'll try that. Well, before the first of the year came along, another decision was made, and that was that in the state of Arizona, they were moving all of the sex offenders into the same prison in Florence, Arizona. And that's quite a ways away from Tucson. But anyway, they were moving them all there. So they moved them all out of the prison in Tucson. There's only one there now, and he's in for manslaughter, although he's a sex addict. And I reckon him there in Tucson. So now they're all in the same unit up in, maybe in a couple of units up in Florence. And I'm in the process now of making the appropriate contacts. And you have to be gentle, and you have to be careful, and you have to be diplomatic, and you have to bow and scrape in order to even talk to somebody. But I'm working now at making the right contact so that I can hopefully talk to the right person about the possibility of setting up an SA meeting in that unit. Now that they've got the sex offenders together, can we do that? Don't know how that'll work out. I don't have to know. I just have to do one step at a time. Just keep it going and see what happens. And I have some hope. I know from my own correspondence, I'm now corresponding with at least half a dozen guys in that one unit. So I know that there's a nucleus there who has some sobriety and could run their own meetings. But if I could get up there maybe once a month to stimulate it, get it started, get it moving, monitor it to see that it's going all right, maybe then we could get something really going in that prison, in that unit. I would like to see our prisons become really correctional institutions. I think this is one chance for sex offenders to get some real correction while they're there in prison. So I'm working at that, struggling with it. I'd like to make it work. One other thing I want to do before I get off this podium. I told you that my wife and I have been married twice. We were married 13 years the first time. We've been married over 9 years the second time. And I won't say my sobriety is dependent upon her, but a lot of my serenity is. She has never once in this 9 years ever said, well, that's because you left me, or anything like that. Bygones are bygones. We live in the present, and we live for the future. And we've been through an awful lot. I put her through an awful lot. I left her to raise 2 little girls by herself, right into and through most of their teenage years. And that was a big struggle for her. And so I'd like to introduce her to you. I want you to stand up, Rita. We have a fantastic life together today. And I owe it all to you folks, because if it wasn't for SA, I wouldn't be here. Thank you.